This is the ghost dance. The Native Americans created this dance to express their grief over losing their way of life to the white man. Before, the army forced the Native Americans west, but as the number of white settlers increased, so did the amount of land needed for them to settle. Naturally, things grew tense between the Plains Indians, settlers, and the army. These tensions later grew into violence. In 1864, the Cheyenne Indians were massacred by U.S. troops. Even after agreeing peacefully to return to their Colorado reservation, 150 people were killed in the bloodbath. Congress voiced their disapproval of the actions. However, the commander in charge was not punished. 1876 was the year the Battle of Little Bighorn took place. The government had ordered all Sioux Indians to leave their territory. Instead of complying to the outrageous demands, several thousand Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho took up arms at Bighorn River. George Armstrong Custer led an attack on the Indians, but his men were slaughtered. This was a huge victory for the Sioux, however, it was also their last. In December of 1980, U.S. troops captured some of Sitting Bull's followers. The soldiers demanded the Indians surrender their weapons, but instead fighting ensued. The American troops were superiorly armed and killed many Sioux warriors, and even the women and children that attempted to flee. In total, 300 Indians lay dead. Resistance ended in the west as the government forced the Indians onto smaller reservations, capturing or killing any opponents to its plans. The Apache leader Geronimo left his tribe's New Mexico reservation and led raids on the border to Mexico for years before being captured one final time in 1886. One thing the government wished to achieve by creating the reservations was Americanizing the Indians. They wanted the Indians to eat, talk, act, dress, and live like white Americans. The Bureau of Indian Affairs created special boarding schools to assimilate the Indian children into American culture. As gold and other precious minerals were being found in the western lands, more and more people, men, families, and even single women made their way west. These people gathered together in mining communities which were little more than groups of tents and shacks. As more families arrived, these groups sometimes grew into large towns. These miners began working on their own and later went on to work for mining companies. Following the Civil War, cattle ranching grew popular. This was helpful when the demand for beef in the East grew due to the expansion of large city populations. To meet this demand, ranchers hired cowboys to walk herds to railroad tracks to be shipped. Despite the Great Plains being labeled as desert, unfit for cultivation, people poured in with the encouragement of the government. The government passed 3 acts to encourage settlement in the Great Plains. The Homestead Act stated any white American over the age of 21 could claim 160 acres of land, granted he settled it for 5 years. The Pacific Railway Act gave land to railroad companies in the hope they would build railroads and telegraph lines. The Morrill Act was passed to build colleges to teach agriculture and the mechanic arts. In the 1850s, the Bessemer process expedited steel making, as well as making it cheaper. In addition to this, railroads expanded almost 5-fold, from the north and southeast into the west. The Union Pacific built tracks going from Omaha to the west, while Central Pacific built tracks from California going east. The two tracks met in Utah Territory. The late 1800s were also a time that saw the rise of big business. Entrepreneurs started ventures to make money in a system of free enterprise, or capitalism. Capitalism was faulted with many inequalities, which were explained away with social Darwinism, the idea that stronger individuals, businesses, and nations would thrive, weaker ones, however, would fail. Some of the entrepreneurs who fit into the first category of people, the fittest, or those who would survive in social Darwinism, were John D. Rockefeller, who started an oil refinery, Andrew Carnegie, a poor Scottish boy who started his own business and climbed the ladder to the top of the steel business, and George Pullman, who designed sleeper cars for long-distance railroad travel. The American workforce, which filled the factories owned by the rich, was composed of European immigrants and rural Americans who found their way to the big cities looking for work. This boom in American industry and economy did not come, however, without its own challenges. In 1877, workers protested cuts in wages by blocking the movement of trains. Employers then fought against uprisings such as the Great Railroad Strike of 1877 and the Haymarket Riot in 1886 by forcing employees to sign documents preventing them from joining unions. Now, there may be more to this chapter, but I wouldn't know. My book is missing a good 10 pages.